the vice presidential and presidential debates.
Mientras la crisis en Rusia.
We continue to keep an eye on the heightening tensions in Europe. Thousands of people in Russia took to the streets today to protest the assault on Ukraine. This comes even as authorities warned participating in anti-war protests could lead to prosecution and criminal charges. Russian police have arrested over 1,700 protesters. The Ukrainian military says it is resisting Russian forces attempting to advance from the north. At least 2 Ukrainian army vehicles were seized as Russian troops try to close in on Kyiv. The United States says it is ready to take in Ukrainian refugees and assist other European countries near Ukraine. CNN's Atika Schubert will give us the latest live from Lviv, Ukraine, later in the program. Russian forces have taken control of the Antonov Air Base near Kyiv as Ukrainian troops try to mount a counter-offensive. CNN's Matthew Chance was at that base and had an exclusive encounter with Russian troops.
Keep inside, keep inside.
In here, against the
How
wall.
can I find them?
Focus. Should we run that way?
Right. We've got to be mindful of the driver as well, okay?
Speaking to CNN, Ukrainian officials said they are afraid Russia is planning to take the capital and replace the leadership of Ukraine with a pro-Russian government. With Russia's assault on Ukraine, Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana insists the Philippines will remain neutral for now. Our George Cahiles reports.
The Philippine government has yet to see any possible security threat to the country amid the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Reason why Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana says the Philippines will not side with either party for now.
Tayo naman, we'll just closely watch what's happening there and be prepared. Wala naman tayong pakialam doon sa Europe, sa kanilang ginagawa. Hindi naman tayo katabi ng Ukraine. Sila mismong yung mga bansang karatig ang mga nagpapahayag ng suporta especially sa Ukraine.
As of now, Lorenzana says the military is already preparing to protect the country should the conflict reaches our shores. The Defense Secretary adds that the procurement of 16 heavy-lift choppers from Russia will still proceed as planned. Officials are actually worried about the impact of the increasing petroleum prices in the world market due to the war. Ukraine is among the biggest oil suppliers in Europe.
Para yung nangyayari sa kapaligiran, lalo't higit sa Ukraine, ay magkaroon tayo ng peaceful settlement kasi tatamaan at tatamaan tayo dyan. Bakit? Ang Ukraine ho, supplier ng crudo yan, supplier ng... Kung may gulo dyan, di tataas yung presyo.
Hindi pa nga nag-umpisa yung mga kaguluhan noon, itong mga nakaraang linggo, tumataas na yung mga halaga ng langis. Bakit? Kasi yung mga bansa na are expecting some troubles are already stockpiling, buying furiously the oil so that they can stockpile and have some yung buffer if things go wrong. So dapat ganoon din tayo, maghanda tayo dahil tatamaan talaga tayo rito.
The Foreign Affairs Department is calling on the international community to reaffirm its commitment to peaceful resolution of disputes. In a statement, the DFA says countries must exert efforts to resolve issues through peaceful and diplomatic means to avert humanitarian crisis, like what's stated in the Manila Declaration of Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
In a tweet, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Locsin says he's flying to Warsaw to personally check on Filipinos at the Ukrainian border. Poland has agreed to welcome Filipinos fleeing Ukraine even without a visa, according to Secretary Locsin. The stage is all set for CNN Philippines' back-to-back presidential and vice presidential debates this weekend. Tristan Odalo gives us a sneak peek.
CNN Philippines is back at the University of Santo Tomas for the presidential and vice presidential debates this weekend. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, expect changes. This building across the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion will serve as holding room for candidates and their teams. Upon arrival here at the UST Engineering Building, candidates and their teams will have to undergo the basic health screening process, including temperature checks and the use of hand sanitizers. And then they will proceed to their holding rooms. This is one of the holding rooms for the CNN Philippines presidential and vice presidential debate. In order to follow the minimum health standards, candidates can only bring 10 members of their team to avoid overcrowding. Medical teams will also be on standby. People who will be on site should present negative COVID-19 test results.
I'm really very excited to find out what our vice presidential candidates will say about the various issues that are besetting our country. Alam mo naman ngayon, marami tayong mga problema from COVID-19 to jobless Filipinos, to the economy, to peace and order. So kailangan natin malaman sa ating mga vice presidential candidates how they will be involved with the next president of the Philippines, because they're not just a spare tire, they're just a heartbeat away from the presidency.
One major difference from past debates, no live audience. Walk-ins will not be allowed and there will be no LED screens on display outside the venue. But the public will get the chance to view the event virtually. There will be an audience that will come from different sectors, including women, LGBT, the academe, and youth. A number of voters are excited to watch their candidates and hear about their plans for the country.
Solusyon ng mga presidente sa mga nangyayari sa atin. Katulad yan ngayon, pandemic. So since pandemic, para matapos to, ano yung mga dapat na gawin nila, ganun. Tapos marinig din yung mga boses ng mga nasa ibabang mga tao.
Mga rider po mas gusto po namin malaman yung tungkol po sa pagtaas ng gas. Paano po namin to may budget po sa amin. Napakataas po talaga ng gas ngayon. Minsan po, yung one day po namin na kinikita, minsan sa gas na lang po napupunta.
9 presidential candidates and 7 vice presidential bets will face off here at the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion over the weekend. Side by side, they will present their plans and visions for the country and address issues that matter most to Filipinos in one stage. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
Just one more day before the CNN Philippines vice presidential debate, 7 VP candidates will stand side by side to answer the hard questions tomorrow, February 26th at 5 p.m. at the University of Santo Tomas. Also catch CNN Philippines' pre-debate special at 4:30 in the afternoon for more of what to expect ahead of the showdown. Nine presidential candidates will also face off on Sunday, February 27 at 5 p.m. also at UST. These COMELEC-accredited debates are in partnership with UST and Microsoft Philippines to help you make an informed choice come May 9th. Up ahead, today marks the 36th anniversary of the People Power Revolution. We take a look back on how Filipinos reclaimed the country's democracy. And actor and filmmaker Sean Penn is in Ukraine working on a documentary about Russia's attack on the former Soviet nation. Newsnight returns after this break.
Importante yun kasi mas makikita ng mga citizens, ng mga voters, yung kung ano yung naturang platform and yung kung sino ba talaga yung mas dapat iboto bilang president.
Importante para malaman natin kung ano ba yung mga plano nila, yung mga plataforma nila sa ating bansa pagka nahalal sila.
Opo, importante po yun. Kasi para malaman natin kung ano mga layunin nila sa pamahalaan ng Pilipinas.
Meron tayong mga tumatakbo na ngayon lang umusbong simula nung magkandidato na, pero yung simula nung pandemic wala naman talagang naigawa eh. Pero para sa akin talaga, gusto namin malaman kung ano ba yung mga balak nila talaga sa buong Pilipinas. Kapag may mga debate po na mangyayari po, lalo na sa social media na ipapalabas, nakaantabay na po talaga kami manood.
Welcome back. It was a busy day at the People Power Monument as the country marked the 36th anniversary of the historic EDSA revolution. Stanley Gaheta made the rounds and filed this report.
Today marks the 36th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution. The country's triumph over tyranny remains at the heart of its commemoration.
Ang EDSA kasi is about changes through peaceful means. So, yun yung maganda doon, no, na ang isang malaking problema is yung conflict na resolved through peaceful means.
Manila Cathedral also tolled its bells, symbolizing the gift of achieving change through prayers.
Historians say that the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution was the country's game-changing victory against tyranny. And because of that, the Philippines became an inspiration to the whole world after it restored democracy in bloodless and peaceful means.
While remembering the bloodless revolution, various groups at the People Power Monument attended a rally by activists, church leaders, and victims of martial law. Their aim is to debunk myths about Marcos' leadership and the status of the country during the dictatorship. Speakers shared some facts about martial law.
Kung walang ninakaw, bakit may nababawing nakaw na yaman? Kabawi tayo ng 170 billion pesos as of 2016. Ayon sa record ng PCGG, saan galing pala yun? Saan lang, basta na lang lumitaw?
Kailangan yung mamamayang Pilipino na dapat ay hindi kinakalimutan yung kasaysayan natin, ano? Kung paano natin winakasan yung madilim na karanasan natin ng diktadorang gobyerno, no?
Ang hindi ko makakalimutan ay ang sa gitna ng paghahasik ng lagim, sa gitna ng malawakan na korupsyon, sa gitna ng walang habas na pagpapasasa ng mga Marcoses, ano? Ay ang determinasyon ng mga Pilipino na labanan ng diktadura.
Historians believe Filipinos should not blame the People Power event on what happened after the revolution. A bugging question remains, what have we Filipinos really learned from that part of our history? Stanley Gahete, CNN Philippines.
Catholic bishops warn Filipinos against historical revisionism and disinformation on martial law, especially in the run-up to the May polls. AC Nichols reports.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines is making a stand against what it calls radical distortions about the Marcos regime, noting that people referring to that period as the golden years are lying. In a pastoral letter issued on the 36th anniversary of the People Power Revolution, the CBCP rejects efforts to downplay human rights abuses, corruption, and economic slump during the regime of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos. As the 2022 elections near, the group says it is not endorsing a specific candidate, but urged Filipinos to side with the truth.
labanan naman natin yung nagsasabi ng hindi totoo. At kung malinaw sa inyo kung sino ang hindi nagsasabi ng totoo, di wag iboto yun. Ang iboto natin, yung pumapanig talaga doon sa totoo.
The son of the late dictator, former Senator Bongbong Marcos, is dominating pre-election surveys. He usually evades questions about the martial rule and people power revolution, saying these issues happened many moons ago. But his supporters are known to push the narrative that the martial law period marked the country's economic golden age. Asked if they were alluding to Marcos supporters, the CBCP says it's only after the truth.
Kung sila ay tinamaan, baka totoo, no? Because ang pinatatamaan lang naman natin dito, ang tinutumbok talaga natin ay yung totoong nangyari. Huwag lang nating babaluktutin yung totoong nangyari.
The CBCP insists it remains non-partisan, but never neutral. David even lauded religious groups who have united behind a common candidate, such as the Couples for Christ and the Lasallian Brothers, who openly endorsed the candidacy of Vice President Leni Robredo. AC Nichols, CNN Philippines.
Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte will not attend the vice presidential debate sponsored by the Commission on Elections. Her team did not explain why. Duterte's spokesperson, Liloan Mayor Cristina Frasco, says the presidential daughter did not receive a formal invitation to attend COMELEC's first VP debate on March 20th, despite an earlier announcement from the poll body. But Frasco notes that Duterte won't participate either way. The team of Duterte's running mate, Bongbong Marcos, also said the former senator has not confirmed his attendance in the COMELEC's first presidential debate on March 19th. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez earlier said all presidential and vice presidential candidates have committed to joining the event, except for VP Bet Lito Atienza, who is recovering from his knee surgery. Similar to more developed countries, televised debates now play a key role in our nation's election cycles. Why are these political showdowns important for both candidates and voters? Senior correspondent David Santos reports.
When Rodrigo Duterte and Leni Robredo were elected in 2016, their performances during televised debates were widely viewed as having played a crucial role in their victories.
I think debates are important because they allow voters to access candidates' platforms in a comparative way.
London-based Filipino debate expert and rights advocate Sharmila Parmanan explains why live candidate face-offs have become an election staple just like in other countries.
But second, it also creates a more accountable public culture and political culture, because the signal it gives to political candidates is you need to explain yourself. You need to justify yourself. And we create a culture where people are willing to ask questions and willing to challenge policies.
More than just presenting their platforms in equal opportunity, political debates primarily help voters make informed choices.
Kasi gusto nating ma-empower yung voters eh. So para pagdating ng election day, sigurado sila na matalino yung magiging desisyon nila, na pinag-isipan nila yung magiging desisyon nila.
Parmanan says voters should watch out for motherhood statements and empty promises.
So don't look for candidates that promise the moon and the stars.
Fact-check their claims and keep an eye on their demeanor.
Look at their unscripted answers as well, which can indicate some things about their temperament. How do they characterize their opponents? Are they able to accept criticism?
A live audience can make a spectacle out of a political showdown, but since we're still in a pandemic, tech giant Microsoft, through its Microsoft Teams technology, will set up a virtual audience that will take part in the two-day CNN Philippines debates.
It will enable a more human feel to it, you know, bringing the energy of a virtual audience into the mix and allowing for a more personal interaction between the candidates and our audience. Microsoft really feels a strong responsibility to ensure that the democratic process is upheld for every Filipino.
CNN-PH and Microsoft have been working for months on this project, hoping to bridge the voters and the candidates in this historic election. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
Mientras la crisis en Rusia
turn to our top story. The Russian assault on Ukraine continues as explosions and air sirens ring out in Kiev and other key cities as early as 7 in the morning. European leaders announced tougher sanctions to punish Russia, while other nations continue to condemn the aggression. Ukraine says it is resisting attempts by Russian troops to advance on the capital. CNN's Atika Schubert tells us more about this war live from the city of Lviv. Atika, tell us what is happening there and any update on the casualties.
Well, I don't know if you can hear this right now, but air raid sirens are going off in Lviv. We had several this morning, and we had some yesterday, but this is the first time we've seen it this late in the day. Normally, what seems to be a pattern here for the last 2 days is we hear this air raid siren early in the morning, and that indicates possible missile strikes in the area. We know that 2 airfields were hit over the last 2 days, but this one now is a bit unusual. Seems to be dying down now. People are supposed to seek shelter when they hear that air raid siren. Churches have become designated safe places for a lot of people here. We saw one kid running to get home to safety. So things are nervous here, but they're not in any way as bad as they are in Kiev, in the capital, where fighting is ongoing. The Ukrainian defense minister has come out saying that Russian reconnaissance forces have now entered the northern districts of the capital, and he actually put out a tweet urging residents to make Molotov cocktails, in his words, and to fight the occupiers. Our own crew on the ground there also saw civilians fleeing heavy fighting. So the situation appears to be quite chaotic in Kiev. And in answer to your question on casualties, we know from the Ukrainian president who addressed the public today, early this morning, in a Facebook message, that we have 137 casualties so far, although we do expect that number to rise, Mai.
Well, Atika, there were protests earlier today. Tell us, how are Russians reacting to this conflict?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, to protest in Russia against the war in Ukraine is a very courageous act. As we saw, a number of people had already been arrested, but that didn't stop people from coming out, especially in St. Petersburg, where you saw these huge crowds coming out against this war. And I think that goes to show it's a sign, perhaps, of public opinion in Russia that this is not a popular war. It's not clear how much public backing Russian President Vladimir Putin has. And I think you have to keep in mind that many Russians feel very close to Ukraine. Many Ukrainians feel that even though they don't want to be a part of Russia, they feel quite close to Russia. They see each other as sort of brothers. So this is a war and a conflict that I think really hits home for Russians especially.
Well, Atika, European leaders have announced tougher sanctions to punish Russia, while other nations continue to condemn the aggression. Can you tell us any new steps taken by world leaders?
Well, certainly Ukraine is hoping for all the help it can get, especially sanctions. And what Ukraine wants to see is the full power of sanctions being imposed on Russia now. What Ukraine wants to see is the world isolating Russia, punishing it for this attack on the country. Specifically, Ukraine would like to see Russian banks being prevented from operating in the international system, meaning, for example, their transfers on the SWIFT system would not be able to go forward. This is what Ukraine would like to see. The reality is the United States and European allies are putting in tough sanctions, but they're still holding back some of the even tougher ones. And I think that's because they're hoping that this will be enough to deter Russia, and they're holding some back for extra leverage later. But as you can imagine, many here in Ukraine want to see the maximum being imposed now.
To you and your team, Atika, thank you for that report, and do stay safe. That was CNN international correspondent Atika Schubert, live from Lviv, Ukraine. World-famous actor Sean Penn is working on a documentary in Ukraine as Russia began its assault. The office of the president says Penn came to Kiev to tell the world the truth about what's happening. The star has met with President Zelensky for the project And Variety reports the documentary is being done with Vice Studios. Vice Media Group confirmed the project but wouldn't say if Penn was involved. More stories ahead. Almost 3 years since closing its doors, this famous amusement park in Pasay City is back. And the first game for Gilas in this month's FIBA qualifiers has kicked off. We get you up to date on how the match against India is unfolding. Welcome back. On the hard court, Gilas Pilipinas is well into their first match for the FIBA qualifiers February window. The national men's basketball team is facing India, with Gilas taking the lead at 26-19. The Philippines currently holds a 1-0 record after yesterday's default win because of South Korea's withdrawal. Here's the lineup for Gilas players for this match, which includes returning Japanese B-League imports Thirdy Ravena, Dwight Ramos, and Juan Gomez Deliano. Regardless of the results of the qualifiers, the Philippines is already through to next year's FIBA World Cup as one of the host countries. On to another league. After a 2-year break because of the pandemic, the UAAP is finally making a comeback. Season 84 formally opens on March 26, featuring men's 5-on-5 and 3-on-3 basketball, women's volleyball, cheer dance, pumse and volleyball, and also chess. Speaking of comebacks, Star City's thrilling rides and attractions are open to the public once again. The theme park in Pasay reopened yesterday, nearly 3 years since a fire in October 2019. Following renovations, Star City is up and running again, operating from Thursday to Sunday, 12 to 8 p.m. Again, join us this weekend as we help you get to know your candidates. Catch 7 out of 9 vice presidential candidates in our debate on Saturday, February 26th at 5 p.m. live at the University of Santo Tomas. And watch 9 out of 10 candidates face off at the presidential debate on Sunday, February 27th, 5 p.m. also at UST, only here on CNN Philippines. And that's it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Mai Rodriguez sitting in for Pia Ontiveros. This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.